He wants Jefferson, climbs the ladder. Oh my goodness!
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Rum Pure Sports Sabersim show. We're breaking down the NFL slate a little bit. Obviously, we're not going to go into huge detail on all the NFL plays, but we're going to show you the optimizer here with Sabersim. So if you haven't signed up, use that code NFL17 to get you 17% off. You get the Rum Pure Sports package. You can also get Sabersim with it as well. So you got to get in there. It's some awesome stuff, and we're going to break it all down. We're going to talk about how to use the optimizer, how it's beneficial. You got people out there that still like the hand building. Listen, nothing wrong with hand building, right? It's enjoyable at times, but I am a firm believer that using the optimizer is a very important part of DFS, especially when you got guys like our guy John over here just crushing it with the optimizer 24/7, right? So I don't want to compete with him by hand building my lineups. I want to be able to use an optimizer as well. Let me bring in Statistational John. How is it going for you? And are you excited to be on the show?
Very excited, man. Yeah, I'm. It's not optimal right now because I am on the road as I got kind of displaced here with the hurricane, but I'll be back home tomorrow. So hopefully everyone can hear me well off the laptop mic. But yeah, I'm excited for the NFL season. Excited to be with Run Pure, man.
Yeah. Is this your first show with us, John? Is this the first time on?
This is it. Guys, popping my Run Pure cherry.
Nice. I'm happy to be here for you popping your cherry, John. I'm excited to be here for it. We got to bring in Rubio Dimes, though. Rubio is the one controlling the screen share today. He's going to go through the Sabersim stuff. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. Rubio, how is it going over there for you?
Oh, it's going great, man. I'm pumped for football. Obviously, we get college football tonight. We get the fiddle with the optimizer even later on for the 5 p.m. premium show. So I can't wait to do that. And obviously, like, it's football. I really came close in the preseason fiddling with all these settings. I think the changes that came to Saber are going to be really awesome once we get used to it. And that's why we're doing this video. I know change is always a little bit, scary if you're experiencing it for the first time when it's something different than what you had. So I'm really pumped to explain some of the new features that were added, using them, toward a week one purpose. Like, we can just talk about, how you can build effective lineups with, Sabersim or just an optimizer in general. So I'm pumped, man, going. I can't wait for later tonight too for some CFB.
Yeah, I'm very excited for some CFB tonight. Should be a good time. It's not just tonight, right? It's all weekend. We'll have there'll be a decent slate tomorrow. Saturday will be great too. We'll have MLB going on. I mean, we got it all going on over here at Rum Pure Sports. So be sure to go sign up. Again, you use that code. I'll pull it up on the screen, right? 17% off. And this is for life for all the packages. You also, if you can add it on with Sabersim if you want. So get in there. It's definitely going to be a good time. But Rubio, let's go back to you. As we dive into things here, talk about Sabersim and some of the new upgrades that they've had. They do have a classic mode that you can go back to if you want. So if you're not comfortable with it yet, or you want to, take some time, that's perfectly fine. But talk about the new changes that have been made and what you like about it.
Yeah, so I mean, if you do want to go to the classic mode, there would be a button here on the top right with the, where the 3 bars are right here. You'd have that option to go back to classic. I don't have that option under the admin process, but basically some of the changes that have kicked in are really cool. You don't have all the games up top anymore, so people might be wondering how to sort players, positions, and stuff. Well, it's real easy once you get used to it. Like, if you want to sort by team, you'll right-click team, and then you can select any team, and it'll pull up their player pool. We have James Conner for the Cardinals here, Kyler Murray, Marquise Brown. Obviously, Murray's out and stuff, but you can do that for any team. You can even select multiple teams, just like you were able to before. That would take me a little bit too.
That's a nice feature if, like, the optimizer, let's say projection-wise, let's say the projections are not pushing the Falcons as much as you'd like.
Yep.
That's a great way to go in and bump them all by like a point or two, right? And then see if they hit. Not saying you need to, but that's a way to do that. So these are great little tools that, hey, sometimes people, they just go in and they run the optimizer and they just want to spit out winners. Listen, if it was that easy with no adjustments, then anyone would do it. We'd all just be printing money, right? You got to put your own secret sauce on it. And that's one way to do it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. You can do this for everything too. People were talking about how do we sort by position? Well, you do the same thing. You right click, we can do defenses, right? Oh, everyone loves to play defenses in 2023, but yeah, you can do this for any position too. And I think, especially in the preseason, doing this, across the board for quarterbacks and stuff, it really helped. And one of the biggest things is, people are afraid to use some of the features in the optimizer. I know I was for a few years and stuff. So these changes, not just with the sorting stuff, from a visual perspective, all the features that you used to have that you might have thought, oh man, how do I get back to these? It's just a right click away. And then some of the features they also added too. We have a sim mode and an optimizer mode. I know John pre-show was talking about how he's excited for the sim mode potentially for NFL. And I do want to bring up for other sports too. I use the optimizer mode. Can't sim everything. Everyone knows that I'm a big WNBA guy, and I'll definitely use randomness and stuff. Obviously, that's not on Saber yet, but basically setting min salaries has always been a feature there. But we also now have randomness that we can add to Saber. And I usually did a 50% randomness thing for preseason, but you can add any randomness that you want. Say you want higher variance, you want people to be 70% within their projection, higher or lower. And it gives you unique builds. You can name it, save the randomness, and then you can uncheck one and basically roll with that. That's a big deal for me, especially in soccer. And I imagine it'll still be the same case. I had a successful preseason because of it. And I think these rules and randomness things are very good features that they added, Mango.
No, yeah, I think you bring up really good points about that. Ruben, before we go over to John to discuss some stuff, can you explain the difference between the sim mode and the optimizer mode, right? Because they do two different things. And talk about the reasoning for it. I think sometimes it's preference, and I think some slates and sports it's different. But talk about the difference between them and how you use them.
Yeah, so for optimizer, for example, I think we've had a little bit more experience with that because obviously we've been using the optimizer mode for a long time. It's been basically kind of the standard for the most part. I do want to mention the fact that that's probably the mode you're going to use for any sport not named NFL, right? Because we can't sim or anything. So that I'm so used to that mode. It kind of gives me, I put in my own projections for soccer and everything. NFL will be the same way. And then I'll set a randomness feature, and then it'll kind of spit out lineups based on the rules that I set. But it won't be super correlated unless I make my projections correlated in that way, in that sense. It'll give me players that I'm high on. It'll give me unique builds with uniques as well, uniques that we'll get to a little bit later on why that is important too. And the sim mode, it's going to give me heavily correlated lineups. Basically, we fiddled with the sim mode for college football last weekend, and it gave me some really cool lineups. I just thought my first impression was, oh man, it might be a little bit too chalky. So I'm going to fiddle with those projections a little bit. I shouldn't say chalky. It just gave me a little bit too much of players. I couldn't have that complete control with the uniques, but some of those lineups were heavily correlated and had a lot of game stacks. And it really made it intriguing if you're doing a lot of lineups. Those game stacks obviously are huge for, taking down the first place prize.
Oh yeah, no, definitely matters a lot. You want to have, those kind of unique sets in there. And we'll discuss it a little bit further as we dive in, but let's go from one guy who loves the ladies to a guy that the ladies love. That's my guy, John, over here. So, John, talk about the optimizer, some tips and tricks that you might know. You obviously have dove deep into this. You taught me a bunch so far. Some things that I felt like I was doing right, but you kind of helped right the ship a little bit for me on some of the things that I was doing and fixing some issues. So talk about some tips and tricks for the people on how to use Sabersim here.
Well, I'll tell you, when I use any optimizer that I use, I try to use different projections than everyone else is using for that particular optimizer. I think that's important because for obvious reasons, right? If you're playing GPPs like I play with, generally everything's a 150 entry, mass entry, GPP, you're going to get a lot of similar lineups to what other people are getting if you don't have different projections in there. And you don't necessarily have to customize your own projections, but let's say you're using the RPS projections with Saber, you may want to go through those projections and go ahead and increase or decrease the players that you like. So if you like someone in particular that you want to get more of, then I don't mind going in there. Let's say, you like Lamar and you want to just jack Lamar up 2 or 3 points or something like that. And then maybe his pass catchers as well. So you get more of his combos. So I like to do that so that I'm a little bit different. And in the same ilk here, I tend to mess with projections more than I mess with any of the other variables. So if I'm not getting, I've gone over this with Mangone before, where if I'm not getting enough of a player in my builds in an optimizer, I will change the projections before I will change like that min own, like I want to own that player 25%. I'll change the projections to try to get there. For some reason, I feel like it works better on the optimizers if you, with the least amount of things you could possibly touch, the more you play with it, the more rules you put into an optimizer, the less optimal I believe it's going to be. So the most success I've had is touching it at the most minimal level I can. So the adjustments that I do tend to be more on the projection side of it.
I think that's a great point that you brought up. And yeah, I mean, I'm definitely someone in the past who's been like, I cap things and min stuff. And I try to do that a little bit less. I will admit, once NBA season comes, if things get wild, I might have to set a cap here and there. But I do think overall you are correct with that. And I've definitely seen some success with that. Here's another question for you, John. What's your thoughts on Xing players out of the pool? Now, I talked to you about this a little bit. I've tried to not X as many players. And like one guy in particular, Adam Wainwright, popped up in my lineups not too long ago. And I was like, nah, this ain't happening. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't even want 2%. So what's your thoughts on like the player pool and trying not to do too much with that?
So it depends on the sport, but it's rare that I do it. Now, last night was an example where I did it, right? I didn't want either pitcher in that Colorado game. High total game. I just didn't want the either pitcher because
and it was a short slate, John. It was a short slate, right? And because of that, you're getting too many.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't want to get too many in that game. Now, it turned out Colorado didn't score all that much, but it was going to, because of the fact that we need, in that situation where you had high total, high cost guys on both sides, but really on the Atlanta side, and the way I randomize it, then I was getting some of the Atlanta pitcher because he was really cheap, right? So I wanted to kind of eliminate that. So it's rare. I do it on occasion. Now in the NFL, what I may do, the only players I'll usually X out will be quarterbacks that I just don't want to play that quarterback. And I just kind of let the rest run because to me, the most, nothing's really predictable, but I would say one of the more predictable ones of the positions is going to be the quarterback position. And you could kind of X out the ones that just have no shot when you're MMEing that you think are going to be able to win a GPP for you. So you eliminate those, and in turn, it's going to eliminate a lot of their pass catchers as well because they're probably not great options as one-offs. So I'll let it go. And then when I do it, listen, a lot of the pros out there do it differently. Some guys are very narrow focused, so they'll only play 2, 3, 4 stacks maybe. Or when I say stacks, they'll just play 2 or 3, 4 quarterbacks. I tend to play a lot more. I spread out my risk. I don't think there's a right or wrong way. It's kind of what your risk tolerance is, but I like to have it a little bit more spread out. If you see the if you see my percentages, the percent owned, I never, in NFL at least, I'm very rarely am I very high. NBA, we tend to go on the value guys will be really, really high to the point of max 100%. If there's a min cost guy who's starting, it's 100% all in. I don't think I've ever been all in on a football player. Baseball for sure on a normal slate, never all in. So it's going to really vary by sport, but I don't do a lot of Xing out. And again, that's my suggestion. I would eliminate the quarter, and maybe on occasion you can eliminate some defenses, but we know how random the defense is. And so I do kind of like getting in some of those weaker defenses because you just never know. But on occasion I will do that. And, but yeah, I don't mind getting that 0.8% owned tight end in there on the off chance that he catches a touchdown for me and he winds up in the millie.
I think good points brought up there. Another thing that you had mentioned, and it kind of reminded me of a moment when I was using the Opto last week. I'm playing college football, and I'm on the show, the premium show that we're doing today. And I'm telling you, Bruce has some great calls on some college football players at times, and he nailed the 3K Hawaii player, right? I even forget what his name is, right? I mean, I'm just sitting there and I'm fiddling with the Opto, and I said, I'm not getting him on any team. So I moved his projections slightly up. I think I moved him maybe 1 or 1.5 points. And when I did that, what naturally happened on the slate was because I bumped him and because Hawaii's running back was a really high value, and I had a rule set in that I wanted to have stacks, naturally it got me more of the quarterback from Hawaii. I think it also did that because I bumped up some other projections where it helped make some of the expensive guys more raw point plays. And because of that, naturally, I was getting 25% of the Hawaii quarterback out of nowhere. Now, that was not something that I wanted on the slate, and I did not think was the correct move. So I did what John did. I X'd out the quarterback, right? I said, that's probably not a quarterback option that I want. And if I had set rules in on like certain quarterbacks, like put these quarterbacks with this receiver and whatnot, then maybe I wouldn't have got it. But I had a more of a blanket rule because I didn't want to put too much constraint on the opto like John talked about. So that's why I X'd out the quarterback there. And I mean, he was fine, but he wasn't on the winner, right? I ended up looking because I was curious. I was like, did I make a mistake by taking the Hawaii guy out? And he just wasn't on the winner. There were better quarterback options on the slate. So I was perfectly fine with that. And those are little things that you have to kind of notice when building and understand the rules that you've set in. When you up other receivers, that might bring their running back into play in a stack or the quarterback into play that you weren't getting as much of if you have those rules set in there. So Rubio, let's go over to you. Are there any rules that you wanted to talk about or any other things, Sabersim-wise, you want to bring up here?
Yeah, I think there's a very, centric QB thing here, right? Obviously, we want QBs with their weapons, right? And I think that can apply for almost every quarterback on the board. I think you can make the exception for Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields, Anthony Richardson, and I don't know if you can make the case for anyone else maybe. But, the reason why you don't have to make the rules for those guys is because they have the ability with their legs to run maybe 2 touchdowns, or maybe Justin Fields breaks off another 80-yard touchdown, goes off for 40 DK, and only throws 10 passes, right? So I would make a rule personally. I think I would go in, we have preset options too, where you can stack at least, 3 players with a primary team, and you can select these teams. Like, let's say if I want, I'm super high on the Bengals, Chargers, and Miami, right? Those are my 3 favorite teams on the week. I can uncheck literally every team except the Bengals, Chargers, and Miami, and it'll give me 3 players from them if it's part of my main stack. And since Miami and Los Angeles is a game going against one another, you can even run it back with, hey, at least, 1 player on the opposite team, right? And it might do that for the Bengals too. And you can also set individual rules too by going to group and using at least, if I have the if feature is one I use a lot. If I have Joe Burrow, then use at least one of, well, it would make sense if it was Chase, Higgins, even Irv Smith you can throw in. Burrow is more of a pocket passer, especially with the calf injury that happened recently. Here, let's say I see Irv Smith's projection to me is a little bit low. I'll bump him up a couple points, right? And then we can even throw in Tyler Boyd in there as well. Those are like the simple rules, right? Those are ones that, I think most people are accustomed to. And I think for stacks wise, it makes a lot of sense, using the if feature. I also use the if feature the other way. Like I'll do Bengals with Burrow, but let's say like all of a sudden I had a lineup as well to where, I don't have Burrow in that team. But if it has Higgins and Chase, well, hell, I want Burrow in that. So it kind of prevents different rules too. It's like, and I'll also do the inverse of that where it's like Bengals wide receivers, right? This is how I name my rules and stuff. If I'm using at least 2 Bengals wide receivers or pass catchers, I should say, we can go ahead and organize by team because this feature is really nice. Irv Smith, Jamar Chase, Higgins, Boyd. Well, then I definitely want Joe Burrow in that team. So those are some of the rules that I make, is some of the rules that we made for college football last week too. And I'm going to use that a little bit tonight. And I also want to get to this question by Jordan, because I think this is a great question. And this is one that we talked about earlier this week, Mangone. So would you recommend changing the projection if you're not getting enough of a guy, or do you change the min-max for them to jam them in? And John, you went over this a little bit. You kind of touched on it. You change the projection first. I think that's the way. And there's a chance to where let's say if someone's projection is really bad, like let's say if I bump down Jamar Chase, I think he's, he'll only go off for 11, but look at his price. If I did a min thing of like 40% Jamar Chase, we're just using exaggeration here, it's going to jam Jamar Chase in like probably 40% of my worst teams, like the bottom 40%. It's not going to equally like disperse him into my teams. And when you do min maxes, that's the risk that you are, creating, is that you're going into like, oh, Jamar Chase is going to be on a lot of your bottom teams, and it's not going to diversify it. And that's why, we were talking about diversification. The uniques matter, man. And you were going over that. I would love to hear, John's take like on uniques for an NFL main slate and stuff like that, because that matters. And a lot of people might not understand what makes uniques, so important.
Yeah, well, one thing I think maybe it's just me who's thought this in the past, but I'm thinking like a while back when I had first heard the words uniques, I thought if I'm playing 8 players, right, in NBA, and I put 7 uniques on, well, that's 7 guys that are like, single digit owned, right? That's like, I think where my head goes. And I think a lot of people just go into that as the thought process. And I don't think that's the correct thought process there, but I think that's what people think. John, what's some of your thoughts on what Rubio touched on though here with talking about that?
Well, as far as uniques go, in the last few years, I've increased the amount of uniques that I've used and decreased the randomization. I kind of use them as, I don't know as a lever, let's say. So the more uniques I use, the less random, and then vice versa, right? So you can kind of, in the NFL, I'm going to go 5 uniques typically on a main slate. I do that similar in MLB. And if I went less, I would want to go higher random. That's the style I play. So if I go 5 unique with a 50 random, then if I came down to 4 uniques, I'd want to go up to maybe 65 random, 70, something like that. So you kind of want to adjust it there. And then you may start, that's kind of my baseline, let's say. If your baseline is you want to be a little bit more narrow and you're going to go 5 unique, 25 random, then you adjust based off of that. But I do think the uniques are important. And I've talked to Mangone about this. That's how I get differentiation in the lineup. So that's how I get diversification in my lineups more. And I like it better than just using random. So if I just use 100% random with 1 or 2 uniques, it does not perform as well. I've done a lot of back testing on this, and I've gotten better lineups, at least at the higher end. And that's all I'm really looking to do. When I play MMA, I'm looking to win, right? So I'm not looking to cash as many lineups as I can. It's all about winning and taking down that slate and that contest. So in order to do that, you're looking to get to the extremes. You're trying to get as many standard deviations away from the mean as possible. You want to flatten that curve, right? So we've got the curve. If you're playing cash games, you want to be in the middle of that distribution. When you're playing MME, you want that distribution to be flattened and on the end. So you want really bad lineups and you want some really good lineups, and hopefully one pops for the big one. And I think the more uniques, what I found now in the last few years, the better. You could even go 6 uniques on NFL if you like, but I've kind of stuck with the 5 unique on there and lowered my randomization from where it used to be.
Here, John, here's a question for you. Does that change for like single entry and 3 max stuff? I think there are people that have an appetite for that, especially in NFL, right? NFL, those prize pools are massive. Do you have a different opinion on that? I don't think I've even talked to you about this either, but I don't think it should change too much is my thought process. What's yours?
Yeah. So, I mean, I actually got started at my initial entry into DFS was the 3 max. I forget what it was. It was like the $150 entry, like play action on DraftKings, 3 max. And I did really well with that. But what I used to do there was I would play the same stat, not the same stat, but I would play the same quarterback and maybe change his pass catchers. And then the rest of the lineup would be extremely different. So that's how I would play that. But I wasn't using an optimizer necessarily for 3. For 20, I would use the optimizer and I would use the same exact settings. I would do heavy, 5 uniques, and I would use the same randomization settings as that. So just to give you an example, when we do 150 MME, and then on a night where there's a really good contest for, let's say the monster in baseball or something like that, where it's 18 entries or 20 entries, something like that. I use a random 20 lineups out of the 150. So it's giving me the same. So basically I'm running the same exact thing as I'm doing. So I take my 150 and then I take 20. Really, I'll just take the first 20 because that's going to be fully diversified the way I wanted it, the way I have it set. So when I'm running just specifically for a 20 entry contest, I would run it exactly the same way. Again, that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to catch really good lineups, and in the process, you're going to get some really bad lineups, and hopefully not too many in the middle. You want them spread out. So I like that 5 unique strategy for 20 bills. Three and single digit. I have single entry, of course. You're going to have to just make the lineup that you feel is best. But once you get to 20 and above, then I would start using the 5 uniques and the optimizers.
All right, Rubio, you're shaking your head a bunch. What's some of your thoughts there on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's great points. And just demonstrated, if you saw what I was doing while John was talking, I set it at 5 uniques. These aren't the real projections, by the way. They're going to be completely updated before next week is over. So, but you'll see here that the max ownership I got was, I think, with Jamar Chase at 49% with 5 uniques, which still wasn't as completely because we haven't made rules. We haven't done with anything with quarterbacks or anything. But then I set it at 1 uniques, and I'm very curious to see what this comes out at, because the more diversification that you get, the better. I mean, we're good enough to make strong player pools. We're good enough with the projections that we have. It's about getting these top percenters. And you'll see here with 1 unique, I had 0 guys above 50%, with 5 uniques, right? Then look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players above that 50% mark. And that kind of shows you what uniques do, right? And you have a lot of guys above 22%, where the less uniques you have, the more that you're trying to hit the sweet spot on like a baseball bat, right? Like you're trying to hit like the inch perfect there. But with your diversification spread out, I mean, 1 low-owned play is worth, 3 chalk plays, right? That's what it feels like. You rise up the leaderboards. And Ashlock was an example of that last week in this college football slate. You have it all the time as countless examples in baseball, with 1 low-owned guy, double dongs. And the same thing applies to NFL. Everything is not predictable in this world. What if let's just say Irv Smith Jr. pops off for 2 touchdowns next week? He's probably going to be the optimal tight end. He's probably not going to carry a ton of ownership. And having that spread out, maybe you hit the nuts there. And I love the fact that you mentioned, like, we're not playing for him in cash. Like, we're trying to get first. A lot of these contests is 25% the first even. And if you're not winning, if you're not getting 1% finishes, I mean, that's how I felt with like NBA before Christmas last year, before I changed my process. I'm like, wow, I felt like my exposures were great. Why are my teams not reflecting that? And the reason being is because, well, 1 low-owned guy goes off. If you don't have him, you got to be looking at other ways to get different. And that's what these uniques and stuff are for. And you'll see here with the uniques, we have 87% P Ryan, but when I bumped it up to 5 uniques, it bumped all the way down to like 49% or whatever. Still a little bit too high, obviously, but these are just, examples right now. So it's just great to hear. And like, I hope people take this advice too. It's not easy just to hit, take 2 guys out and hit optimize. You're not going to win that way.
Yeah, well, I also don't think I sometimes we get questions from people in Discord and they say, well, what is this? What settings should you do here? And it's like, I don't think there's just like one way and then you're just going to print money, right? It depends on what it's going to do for you. Like, you have to look at it and like the player pool, like the allocation that it's going to be. And you need to be testing things. You're not just going to hit optimize and print, right? It's just not going to happen. You need to spend time before. I remember the first time that I got Sabersim and looked into it. I know we were talking about the partnership with them. And I said, I'm going to sign up right now and I'm going to spend 4 hours before lock even starts. You can't show up at 6:30 and try to figure out how to use an optimizer. You need to mess around with it. You need to back test it and really learn and understand it. It's just the truth. So that's kind of one thing that I definitely have been messing around with optimizers. And I've used a ton in the industry. Saber's not the only one I've ever used. I've always spent time trying to figure out the ins and outs before really getting to use it and everything like that. John, got any more takes for us on that? Or
yeah, I wanted to piggyback off of what you're saying, because I mean, I do this, as you know, every single day. But when a new sport comes up, or not necessarily new, but when the new season starts for like NFL, I haven't done this since January. I haven't been running these lineups, right? So I have to get myself reacquainted with the optimizer for that particular sport, what my settings are again, how I'm running it, and get my process down. Like MLB, I've been doing every day since April. I've got, it doesn't take me very long to get it down. The NFL, if I show up Sunday next week and just start plugging away, I'm going to be struggling to get them in before lock. So Saturday night, that's when you sit around, start playing with it, start seeing, because if you're not getting what you like, and every time you have to adjust it, you think you have a long time between that 11:30 inactive list and then the 1 o'clock lock, and the next thing you know, it's creeping up on you, and you put in lineups that you don't necessarily like. So start doing it on Saturday. Get yourself acclimated with the system and the optimizer, and also who potentially could be the players that are going to be inactive, and how are you going to pivot based on those inactives, so that when it happens, when you get that list, you're already ready to go. You don't need someone else's projections. You know what you have your own projection in mind. Maybe you're in our Discord and you ask someone, hey, if so-and-so's out, how would you bump up? Who would you bump up here? What would you put? And then you're ready to go with that. Have it on a piece of paper, whatever you want to do, whatever your methodology is. And then you have it ready, and then you should be good. And you'll know already, you ran it Saturday. Those may not be the lineups that you're going to put in. You ran it Saturday night, but you know what the optimizer is giving you. And you're like, you know what? It's giving me too much P Ryan, or it's giving me it's giving me too much of this player. You could fix that all Saturday night. Then Sunday morning you wake up, boom, 11:30 inactive, you are ready to go, and then you shouldn't have any problems.
Yeah, another thing that I'll do too is like if I do a run at like 6 p.m. for baseball, I'm just going to export those teams in because they're halfway decent, right? I'm not just going to keep some crap in there or keep no lineups in there. I think that's a small thing you need to do because, listen, sometimes technology just craps out on us, right? It just happens. Or sometimes DraftKings goes down. Those things happen if you play every single day. You'll experience it. So when using an optimizer, make sure to do those things. They're very little, small things, but I don't know. I like to kind of be over-prepared for the situations. Rubio, any final thoughts here for people?
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback off what Jordan put in the chat here, I think Jordan's asking some good questions because I used to run builds in groups a little bit. I stopped doing that, though, because once you trust what rules that you have set, I mean, I don't want to ever dip my foot half into the water. I'll either dive in or else I'll probably just, take the L in the chin. I think just trusting your process, and that's what the diversification is for with these uniques, spreading out these projections a little bit. I don't ever want to do 75 with stacks, 75 without stacks. We made the example earlier with like Lamar, Fields, and Hurts. Those guys, Anthony Richardson, same way. Those guys don't need to be stacked, right? I definitely want stacks on the other quarterbacks and stuff. So having that rule set up, I mean, I think the cool thing, I just did this sim of Hurt version of this, has Lamar naked, right? And you might be thinking, oh man, maybe they don't stack Lamar. But then the next one's with Andrews. Next Geno lineup is with DK Metcalf, Noah Fant, DK Metcalf. This is the example of the sim tool too. It usually always stacks, has Tua with Waddle, Kirk with Jefferson. It's pretty cool. And I do like the fact that, the first impression was Lamar Jackson going naked. I mean, that's pretty, I like that. I know we have a lot of pass catchers there, but maybe he spreads it around. Maybe he runs one in. So I do like the fact that, the sim feature they're debuting on, Sabersim isn't just complete like, we're just going to jam the highest correlation. No, it kind of isolates these builds too. Like I'm Baker Mayfield in a weak spot against Minnesota with Evans and Godwin, and that I like that. There's a lot of potential here with the run back of Jefferson. It looks like these builds are pretty cool. And I can't wait to try this out. Obviously, it's going to take some getting used to. And that's why we're in the Discord, though. I mean, no one else is going to be there 24/7 like we are here at Run Pure. So, I mean, if you ever have a question about the optimizer or anything, I know John's been great. I know I've been getting secondhand advice from Mangone a lot. And I'll say this. I'm calling the shot now. Mangone or I, because I've talked to Mangone a lot. Mangone or I are shipping college football or NFL slate sometime the next month. I'm calling it now. John, I've been taking a lot of your advice. You might not know that, but like these uniques and stuff, especially for NASCAR, it's crazy how much of a better player it's made me. It's been my best year by far in the DFS world, especially even I apply this information not just to NFL slates, but I'll do my own WNBA projections and I'll put them into the team. I bumped up my uniques and I'll bump up, the min salary and stuff. And all this stuff matters. And, we want to help. And code NFL 17% off for life. Like this price is super cheap for everything that we do, in my opinion, for the optimizer, for everything in Discord, for the community that we have. I speak it to death. I mean, it is definitely the best deal in the business.
I've got some cool spreadsheets coming up too.
Yes.
That are going to be new to the RPS community. So you guys are going to hopefully enjoy it for NFL.
John, can you talk about the stacks chart? Because for one thing, I know people love this. People love stacks, right? They want to know. They want to show up on Sunday morning, right? You wake up. You were hungover last night. You're out partying, having drinks. John knows, hanging out with the ladies, having a good time. He wants to wake up Sunday morning and know who's the stacks of the day. And we have a nice little stacks chart that I think is going to be a really nice tool that you're going to want to get in on. Tell them about it a little bit, John.
Yeah, so basically I started doing it a few years ago where I'll just, based on my projections, I'm going to calculate what's the probability. So you need 30 points on average from your quarterback. You want to get 30 from a wide receiver. So I look at what combination of quarterback, wide receiver, of all the combinations of quarterback, wide receiver, what's the probability that they hit 60? And then what's the probability that at 3 with the comeback hit 90, right? So a 30 from the quarterback, 30 from a wide receiver, and then 30 from the opposing pass catcher. What's the probability? So then I'll just rank them in order. And so that's a nice little thing. And then what you'll see there is also where the value is. And then sometimes you'll get like a Fields may show up as Fields with Commanders, would have been like the 12th best stack. But we know that a good chunk of that was based on Fields and really not the Kmet side of it, right? So I'll show that in a percentage where you say, yeah, this stack is showing a high probability, but it's really only on the bulk of this is on the quarterback side, so you may not want to stack them. You'll see. We'll have these tools up. I was hoping to be able to show some of them in the last couple of days, but I am out of the home office. But I'll be back home tomorrow, and we'll have all of that ready. I've got that. I've got some spreadsheets based on like how much the each position scores against each team and how much that team does at each position against the average. So it's kind of like a DVOA sort of, but it's by position, and it takes the average that team gives up, let's say, to the running backs. And then, so let's say they give up an average of 30 points to running backs every week. And then some team comes in that only averages 20 at their running back position and scores 40 against that team. Like, they're going to get a big knock there because they just allowed way above the average of that other team and above their average. So you'll see, it'll make more sense, and I'll explain it to everybody when all these go up. But we've got some good tools that I think are going to help you guys win some money this year. One quick, I'm sorry, man, I'm going to kind of jump in. Could you stack exposures, Rubio?
Yes.
That's up in the upper on the upper left hand side. Stack exposures.
Yes. Perfect.
I use that.
Yes.
So after I make the builds, I use that, and then I kind of go through, because then you'll see you have like no stack there, no quarterback stack. So I'll like go through that, and I'm like, okay, I want to make sure I don't have any Burrow in those no quarterback. You know what I mean? That's how I do it. If I don't have,
we can even isolate that to the lineups here.
Right. And then you can see the lineups, and then I'm like, okay, I don't mind having Fields here as a no quarterback stack, but I don't really want, like I said, I don't want Burrow, or I don't want Trevor Lawrence, or whatever it may be, and I'll get rid of those. So I'll make like a 500 builds or 1,000 builds, whatever it is, and then I'll start eliminating them. And maybe I don't want, I don't want to go too crazy. Like, I don't want a quarterback 3/4. That's just too much. And then, so that's how I do it without necessarily using, the rules, let's say. So that's how I've done it.
I want to mention this real quick. This is why you can use Sabersim for research purposes, right? To research the lineups, see what they're doing. You might gain some information, and you might see like, hey, listen, like, I'm getting a lot of Lamar Jackson naked. Why is that? Maybe it's because the price of Odell Beckham is just too damn high, right? Maybe he's like 8K or something, and it just does not fit the construction. So those are things that you can learn by looking at lineups and different types. And maybe you look at Saber and you go, maybe you set the rule, a quarterback with at least one receiver. And maybe all your teams are like 2 receivers, and maybe there's a reason for that. That's just something that I think is really a valuable research tool that you can gain some information as you dive in deeper into DFS.
Yeah, like, is that a lineup I want? Like, do I want Jimmy G with like 4 pet? Like, no. So like, I kind of eliminate them there. So that's one I would eliminate.
And that's the best part too, is that we can eliminate it with that trash can button too. And like you were just talking about, we don't want it. We don't want it with Purdy. We don't want him to be naked. We don't want it to have the Kirk Cousins. And we can just go through and click. I mean, until you see someone like Lamar. Oh, I just X'd out Lamar's name, of course. But we can just click through and see if we see a guy like Hurts. That's fine with me, right? We can look at the roster. Obviously, the projections aren't finalized yet or anywhere near finalized. But yeah, this lineup could make some sense, right? There would be a better chance that it would rather than Kirk Cousins naked, right? So that's pretty cool. And I always use this feature too. I can't believe I blanked on it, but it can also even be used for like run back situations as well. Like, QB2, 2 weapons with 1 run back too. So like this lineup here, I praised earlier, I believe. And so, yeah, that's the best part too about the stack exposures, primary. You can even do it with secondary too. It is very nice. Like, it doesn't have to be the quarterback situation, right? Obviously I already have this keyed up, but like, 1-1 stack, right? We can do it with, Kirk Cousins with Justin Jefferson. All of a sudden it has a different game with Amari Cooper and Jamar Chase as a secondary stack there too. So many tools, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, I agree on that. A lot of great stuff here. John, anything else to add?
I think that's it.
Rubio?
Nah, can't wait. We got a college football show here in a couple hours. It's going to be fun.
Yep, premium side, it'll be me, Rubio, Big T, of course, we can't forget Big T, and then our guy Bruce, who shipped 50K with his preseason projections. He's crushed it, helped me out for sure in college football. Had some close teams. Hopefully I can get to the top here this month. Rubio says it's going to be one of us. So if it's not one of us, though, I hope it's one of you guys. So thanks a lot for joining us. Please hit that like out the door. We'd appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel. That's helpful as well. And then again, 17% off for life if you sign up using that code NFL17. Sign up now over at Ron Pure Sports. But for me, Mangone, Rubio Dimes, Statistational, or as I like to call him, John, we will see you guys later.